Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube, and welcome to part 3 of my 6,000 subscriber Q&A series. Spoiler alert, obviously there's going to be a part 4. There's no way I'm going to get through all these questions in this one segment. Also in this segment, I will not say Beanie Baby Bubble Burst, because apparently that became a popular tongue twister out of part 2 of this particular Q&A series that people are even repeating on other collecting forums, which I think is quite funny. It was not my intent to create that as a tongue twister. It just came out because I was talking about that particular market. So we'll see if there's anything more historic that comes out of my mouth in this particular segment. So without further ado, we're going to dive right into the questions. First question, Sean, do you think we will eventually get third-party grading of 33 and 45 RPM record albums, where they put the album in a plastic slab similar to that of a comic book? And if this would occur, what would be the best records to invest in right now? Okay, I do not think we are at a point yet. And again, there is going to be a caveat attached to this. But right now, as I'm filming this video, I don't think we're at a point where record collectors are at a point where they want and or need third-party grading. Most record collectors that come to me through my consulting business, and I have several, tell me that they want to interact with their collection in some way. A lot of the collectors that I deal with in this market, who are also investing in this market, do not go after factory sealed albums because they would rather have a rare album that is in mint condition that they can at least listen to from time to time. So much like book collectors, I don't think this is going to become a thing anytime soon. Now, the caveat that I will attach to this is, if you guys recall, I did a recent video where I talk about a company that is starting to grade VHS movies, DVD movies, Blu-ray movies, and the like. If that would categorically take off, meaning market interest comes into that particular collecting category, I can see somebody saying, you know what, maybe we should start grading and or slabbing records and just see where it goes. So that's the caveat that I would attach to this. But I do not see that happening anytime soon, just due to the makeup of the average record enthusiast, and or if we want to talk about rare books, rare book collector. Most of those collectors and investors in those segments, they do not want or need third-party grading at present time in those markets. So I hope that answers the question. You go on to ask, if this were to happen, meaning if record grading was a thing, what would be the best records to invest in right now? Well, what I will tell you is, obviously, it would be the top 1 to 3% of the market. So for instance, I'll use this because I know this is always an iconic record. The Beatles' Butcher cover album. If you have a copy of that and record grading becomes a thing where people are willing to pay a premium for a lot of these coveted and rare record albums, obviously, if it's in very good condition or great condition and you get it graded and it comes back a high grade, you have something that's going to sell for exponentially more than what it sells for today on the secondary market if this type of adoption should take hold. So that's what I would tell you to go after, the items in the top 1 to 3% of the collecting genre. So I hope that helps. Next question. Sean, when commenting on stamps and maybe other collecting categories as well, you said that for third-party grading to be a catalyst, it needs to be adopted by the collecting community. That's 100% correct. How does this work for graded video games? It seems that WATA isn't very popular among veterans in game collecting, and most find the whole WATA bubble quite ridiculous. You yourself said that most of the people buying up this stuff are probably speculators, and the veteran collectors are selling in. Considering this, how is it that WATA is still successful? Simply because the amount of speculators in that particular market is basically overtaking the amount of wise investors that are selling into it. And as a result, there is a major speculative euphoria right there at present time. You also have the problem where people are cross-collecting. That's why you see companies like Comic Connect and a lot of these other comic book dealers starting to get in to dealing with WATA-graded vintage games. It's a cross-category of pop culture collectors. I have one person in particular who came to me who collects coins like me. And he literally sold part of his collection. Now, this guy has a $1 million collection, no less. He sold $100,000 for it. And he took $100,000 profit out of that collection. And he said, Sean, I want to put at least $20,000 in WATA graded video games. I know you don't like the market, but do you think for what I want to go after, and I'm not going to name what game he's going after, do you think I could stomach the risk? And I said, well, you just made $100,000. So if you're going to take that other $80,000 that you made and put it into traditional assets or real estate, if you want to risk the $20,000 on something as speculative as a graded video game, go ahead and do it. Well, that's what's propping up that market right now. If you don't believe me, look at the price appreciation of graded video games that are not factory sealed, but just complete in box. There's copies of Castlevania, Final Fantasy, Kid Icarus, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Legend of Zelda that are not factory sealed, but complete in box, graded by WATA, that are now selling for premiums. Why is that? Because the speculators are coming into that market going, hey, we can't afford to pay $50,000 to $100,000 for a first printing of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out that's factory sealed, graded by WATA in 9.2, 9.4 condition, but I'm willing to spend X thousands of dollars on a mint in box and graded copy that's complete of Legend of Zelda or Mike Tyson's Punch-Out that's graded by WATA as well. So the market has lags simply because the speculators are giving it lags. Now, will this last long term? No one knows. But what I will tell you is WATA Games is here to stay. Pretty much because of the amount of money they were funded with, because of how they came into the market, they pretty much knew what they were doing. Market manipulators, market makers took hold, and as a result, graded video games are now a thing. And by the way, guys, how they came into the market and how they were able to do this, this is going to be studied by antique and collectible historians going forward, because pretty much they pulled a page right out of the book on market manipulation. They times it by 10, and that's pretty much how they were able to dominate this market. And unfortunately, it's a lot of the people that have vast collections of video games that are pretty much supporting them because they know that the amount of value that WATA is adding to the market right now is enormous and exponential. And that's what's causing this to snowball. And unfortunately, if there is a correction in this market, it's going to be the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexter Juniors that get hurt. It's not going to be WATA Games. It's not going to be the market makers. It's not going to be the market manipulators. And it's not going to be the auction houses. And that's pretty much why I do this on YouTube. That's 100% why, to help those people make informed decisions. Now, do I have a crystal ball? I do not. I cannot tell you what a factory sealed copy of The Legend of Zelda, graded by WATA Games, a first print 9.4, is going to sell for 10, 20, 30 years into the future. So that's my caveat on this. I can pretty much tell you how this is occurring, how it's going to play out, but I don't have a crystal ball in regards to prices for every single individual game out there. Hope that helps. Next question. Sean, there were several instances where you claim that copies of some specific products were hoarded en masse and also kept factory sealed. The way that you word this, I'm assuming you're referring to video games on average. I'm curious, how do you determine this? Sales figures aren't enough because maybe the product in question was simply very popular. I agree with you on your last point, but you got to remember, I'm a consultant in the trade and I also heavily speculate in these items. So I do work with other speculators. I do work with other collectors. I do work with other investors who have large inventories of these items. Most of the information that I have, I'm going to be 100% honest and transparent, is inside information. That's why I don't do in-depth videos telling you guys, well, you need to avoid this particular game. Because if I did that, a lot of people would come at me, well, I'm not going to tell you anything else anymore, Sean, because you go on YouTube, you run your mouth off, and you tell people how many copies exist out there. Now, I will tell you, most speculators, most Timmies, most Kimmies, most Poindexter Juniors out there, even if I did a video where I told you guys how many copies of, let's pick on Pokemon games, How many factory sealed copies of Pokemon X or Pokemon Y or Pokemon Alpha Sapphire or Pokemon Omega Ruby that I'm sitting on in my collection, factory sealed, or that I know of other collectors are hoarding? If I did a video and I told you guys that, most of the speculators, they wouldn't care because they don't bother to watch this channel. This channel does not cater to their own confirmation bias. So they don't even watch me on YouTube. So they would never even get that information. And even if they watched me state that in a video, they wouldn't care because all they hear in their minds, Pokemon is the most successful pop culture franchise out there. It's the most valuable. Therefore, obviously, that means anything with the Pokemon name on it is going to be a good investment, either short-term or long-term. And that is patently false because how do you explain all those wonderful Power of the Force 2 Star Wars action figures that are out there, factory sealed, that are pretty much worthless? Is not Star Wars a valuable pop culture license at present time? Is it not a valuable property? Well, not everything that has Star Wars stamped on it is collectible and or investable. So you got to understand that. You got to look at it from both ends. So I hope that answers the question in full. If you need more information, just let me know in the comment section. I will do a follow-up to your question. I want to make sure that I answered it in full. Next question. Sean, will you ever do a live stream? I've said this before. Potentially, yes, but this channel would have to have a lot more subscribers. I tend to do live streams with other YouTubers. I don't know if you caught the live stream that I did with PokeGal. I thought that was very interesting, where she pretty much asked me questions. It went on for almost 3 hours. It was pretty immense. I must say, I was exhausted after that live stream. So I tend to like doing live streams with other YouTubers. I don't like doing them just by myself because I don't think this channel at present time is as popular as some of the other channels out there that can pretty much sustain themselves by doing live streams. But I'm not against it. Let me word it that way. It's just not at present time. I have no plans to do a live stream by myself. Next question. Sean, what are your thoughts on dollar cost averaging when it comes to stocks? I've been back and forth on whether I should just invest a certain amount of my money each month or save my money until I noticed a dip. Okay, I got to answer this in full. Time in the market matters more than timing the market. Some of you guys are playing this all wrong. Some of you guys are really speculating in the financial markets when you should be investing in the financial markets and speculating short-term on antiques and collectibles instead of trying to invest in collectibles over the long term. Do you see what I just said there? In other words, you're doing it in reverse. You should be speculating in some of these antiques and collectibles over the short term and investing long-term in Wall Street, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. You are better off dollar cost averaging regardless of what the market does day in, day out. For instance, over the past year or two, if you would have tried to time the market in the S&P 500 index fund, you would have literally only gained 0.1% for that entire year. Where literally, if you would have kept your money in the market through the ups and downs, through the Corona crash, you would have made 6.9% on average. So time in the market matters more than timing the market. And this is something you guys got to understand, especially when it comes to index funds. Index funds are already set up perfectly for dollar cost averaging. So you might as well go with dollar cost averaging if you are investing in any type of ETF, mutual fund, actively managed, or index-based. Now, when it comes to an antique or collectible, because you do ask this, should you also dollar cost average? It depends on what the antique and collectible is and what your overall strategy is. For instance, if you're like Rudy with Alpha Investments or even Scott Pratt, and you're going after a specific modern era Magic the Gathering product or maybe a Pokemon product, and you're noticing the market's going like this, and you're buying the dips, you're buying the ups, and you're trying to build a position over the short term in War of the Spark booster boxes, if we want to talk about Magic the Gathering. If that's the case, you can dollar cost average into that particular item as long as you have a written plan as to how you're going to exit the market once you implement that strategy. So for instance, if you want to buy 50 boxes, and I don't recommend this, just using it as an example, 50 booster boxes of War of the Spark on the open market, and you see one eBayer is selling a box for 150. You log on to TCG Player and you see one seller is selling it for 160. Another guy selling it for 170. Well, you buy all three of them and you take the dollar cost average as your cost basis. You can make that work, provided you know how to liquidate that item when the time comes. Where a lot of you make the mistake is you get into a market like vintage comic books and you buy into that market when the market's at all-time highs, like right now it's at all-time highs. And you assume, well, over the long term, Sean, if I'm invested in that market, I can pay $12,000 for a copy of Giant Size X-Men 1 in CGC 9.4 condition. And somebody like me comes to you and figuratively slaps you across the face and says, that is a bad idea to lock up $12,000 right now in one comic book because you think dollar cost averaging is going to save you in a book spending that type of money in the year 2021 over the long term. So it really depends on your strategy and what you're going after. That's how dollar cost averaging can work for you in the antiques and collectibles trade. Now, let me give you one more example as to how this can work for you. Let's say that you're somebody like me that invests in investment grade rare coins. Now, I truly believe in that market, or even you can put currency into this market. I believe in both those markets over the long term. So when I was going after a lot of those pieces that I now have in my collection, I've been going after coins and currency for literally 2 decades now. So if we go back all the way to the early 2000s, or even in the 1990s when I was going after that stuff, because of how I built my collection, there's certain coins that I have where I may have only paid $1,000 for the coin. Today, if I went to sell it, I could sell it for $5,000. Now, why am I telling you that? Because in a mature or even an established market, that can work for you, provided that demand does not fizzle in that particular collecting category. Where you have to watch is, let's say that you're doing this with antique furniture. In the early 2000s, Gothic furniture was all the rage. Well, today in the year 2021, mid-century modern's all the rage. Gothic furniture or Victorian era furniture is out of vogue. So as a result, even if you dollar cost your way into that market, if you went to sell those pieces in the year 2021, you would significantly lose money because most collectors are not going after Victorian era or Gothic era furniture at present time. They want mid-century modern. So that market changed as a result. Now, antique markets are more cyclical than that of collectible markets. So maybe in another 20 years, Victorian and Gothic furniture comes back in vogue. So that's how you can play those markets, just to give you an example. But you really have to have a long time horizon to do that in certain cases. Next question. Sean, wanted to know how you feel about sports cards with a comparison of raw versus graded cards. I mean, sure, graded cards are more profitable, but raw cards don't go down as hard in price. So I guess I'm just curious, do you recommend only buying raw cards or strictly graded cards for investment purposes? I would go after investment grade vintage sports cards if you are investing long term. If you are attempting to speculate in this market, you can go after modern era cards. It's not going to matter. What I will tell you, through long-term investing in this market, you want to go after the heavy hitters. You want to go after, if you can afford it, Honus Wagner, Mickey Mantle. Other vintage cards pre-1970 or earlier are king if you're going to invest long-term. It really doesn't matter as to how you look at this from the aspect of, well, I want to collect in graded cards versus raw cards. I will tell you, any type of investing, any type of long-time horizon, you want to go after graded cards. That's the key. But overall, for modern era cards, I would not worry whether they're graded or not. That's short-term speculation. So I hope that helps. Next question. Sean, can a pop culture IP become historic? Okay, I love this question, guys. And you got to forgive me. My eyes are getting tired. I'm actually filming this video at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we are significantly much later than my usual 1 a.m. So I apologize if I am sort of rushing through these answers. It's not my intent. But I will tell you, pop culture by and large will never be on par with historical artifacts. It will never be on par with edged weapons. It will never be on par with certain historical antiques, antiquities, even coins and currency. If you don't believe me, go back and look up the value of penny dreadfuls, or go back and look up the value of Victorian age comic books. And a lot of you guys state, well, Sean, an Action Comics 1 is always going to be coveted because it's rare. I assure you, compared to certain Victorian era comic books and also penny dreadfuls, they are much more scarce than that of Action Comics 1. The reason Action Comics 1 sells for what it does isn't because just of rarity, which it is considered rare, especially in higher grade. It's due to its importance in the overall comic collecting market at present time. Now, this is what a lot of you guys need to understand, and I want to make this point very clear for any of the speculators, for any of the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexter Juniors that are watching, that love to argue with me in the comment section over this point. The original medium that brought forth a lot of these comic characters, whether it be Batman, Superman, Wolverine, over time, that original medium is going to become less and less important. If you don't believe me, how many comic book shops are still in existence in the United States today? How many younger collectors are avidly going and spending money on brand new comic books in the year 2021? I'll wait while you give me the answer because I already have the key information that we need to answer this question. I'm going to answer it for you. Not very many. A lot of you come to me and you go, Sean, you don't understand. Look at Ultimate Fallout 4. Look at Miles Morales. That is a popular comic book character. That's a popular comic book that's very valuable right now. Obviously, younger collectors are drawn to Miles Morales. And I agree with you 100%. But this is what you're not understanding. Those younger collectors, they're interacting with Miles Morales through video games. They're interacting with that character through other forms of the medium. They're not going to the market and paying a premium for Ultimate Fallout 4. People my age, maybe people in their 20s, 30s, and possibly in their 50s and 60s are. Younger collectors are not going to flock to comic books like people my age, like even millennials are right now. It is not going to happen because the medium is not in the public consciousness like it was when I was growing up in the 1990s when we had the big comic book bubble that eventually burst and all these modern issues dropped in price and people realized they couldn't finance their retirements with a copy of X-Force 1. It wasn't going to happen. Well, today, the kids are not getting their fix through the actual comic books. They're getting it through the movies, the television shows, and the video games. So as a result, the medium is going to matter less and less. That does not bode for a well future for any of these pop culture IPs. And on a long enough horizon, most of these IPs, I'm not going to say that they become worthless, but they become less popular over time. I've said this before. I have 1 million people reaching out to me, over exaggeration, any day telling me, Sean, you don't understand. Pokemon is the most valuable pop culture franchise in history. And I keep telling them it doesn't matter. Just because they stamped Pokemon on something doesn't mean 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, someone's going to want to collect it. The same thing people thought with Star Wars. It has not worked out that way. Go back and do your own research. So I want to make sure that you guys are aware, in most cases, a pop culture IP will never become historic. Now, I'm going to answer this question from another perspective. When we study cultures, if you ask anybody who has a college degree in archaeology or anybody who is educated in how historians look back at other cultures, other civilizations, they pretty much analyze that culture from the aspect of what did they wear, what type of money did they use, what type of artwork did they fathom, what type of food did they eat, how did they prepare that food, and what type of technological advances did they have available to them. Yes, it is possible 200-300 years from now, somebody wants to look back on life in 2021 and they say, you know, I remember one of the pop culture things that were going on at that particular time, Pokemon cards were popular. Guess what? It doesn't mean people are going to rush in and start collecting or investing Pokemon cards from the year 2021. This is why when you guys talk to me how coin collecting is going to eventually die out, or currency collecting is going to die out, or nobody's going to collect historical documents. You are dead wrong, because from a historical perspective, those are the items that people go after to represent a previous civilization or a previous culture. So by and large, that is the stuff that becomes valuable, significant, and historical throughout time. Please learn from that. That's how I'm going to end this Q&A. Thank you for joining me. Part 4 will be uploaded to YouTube after I get some sleep and can actually film it without pretty much falling asleep on you guys. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.